My name is Dora. I'm 32, and I'll never forget the night my new home turned into the loneliest place I'd ever stood in. My whole family promised they'd come celebrate my housewarming, but instead they gathered for something else. Something that broke me. I'll tell you exactly what happened and why it changed me forever. Before I begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about family drama and emotional courage. When I first bought my little house on the edge of town, it felt like my proudest accomplishment. It wasn't big and it wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Every corner carried my effort. The walls painted by my own hands, secondhand furniture I had restored, curtains I had carefully chosen. I wanted my family to see it, to walk in and feel the warmth I had built with every paycheck I had saved over the years. That Saturday evening, I set the table with food I had cooked all morning: homemade lasagna, salad, and a pie recipe I borrowed from my grandmother's old notebook. Balloons were tied to chairs. A simple "Welcome Home, Dora" sign hung across the living room wall, and candles flickered to make the place feel cozy. I didn't expect a huge crowd, just my parents, my sister, and maybe a couple of cousins. Enough to make the house feel alive. By 6 o'clock, I was ready. My closest friend, Heather, had already arrived. She gave me a hug and said, "It looks amazing in here. They're going to love it." I smiled, pretending her words reassured me. But as the minutes ticked by, the unease grew heavier. The clock struck 6:30. I kept glancing at my phone, checking for a text or missed call. Nothing. Heather tried to distract me with small talk, telling me about her kids' school play, but my ears kept listening for the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. By 7, I couldn't take it anymore. I called my mom. It rang 3 times before she answered, her voice unusually cheerful. "Hey, sweetie, can I call you back? We're just out right now." In the background, I could hear laughter and music. She hung up before I could ask more. Heather raised her eyebrows, sensing something was wrong. "Everything okay?" she asked. I nodded weakly, though my stomach churned. At 7:30, my phone buzzed, not with a call, but with a notification from social media. My thumb hovered as I opened it, and there it was, a photo of my entire family, my mom, my dad, my cousins, and of course my sister, standing in a driveway, all smiles surrounding my sister's brand new car. The caption read, "Celebrating Katie's big day. So proud of you, sweetie." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. They hadn't just forgotten, they had chosen her car over my home, her new purchase over my milestone. Heather leaned over, saw the photo, and her face darkened. "Oh, Dora," she whispered. The room around me suddenly felt different. The balloons looked childish. The food on the table smelled too strong, and the sign across the wall mocked me with its cheerful letters. My chest felt tight, like the air had been stolen from the room. I excused myself and went into the kitchen, gripping the counter for balance. My thoughts raced. Why didn't they tell me? Why couldn't they come for just an hour? I kept replaying the image, my father's arm around Katie, my mother beaming at the car, everyone there except me. Heather followed quietly, resting her hand on my shoulder. "You don't deserve this. Not tonight." I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. It's just a car. A car. And they couldn't even stop by for 15 minutes. The night dragged on painfully. A couple of my neighbors dropped in briefly, offering congratulations and a slice of pie, but even their kind words couldn't erase the hollow ache in my chest. Each time the doorbell rang, I felt a flicker of hope, only to see it wasn't them. At one point, around 9, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from my sister, "Katie, sorry we couldn't make it. The car dealership had a big surprise party for me, and Mom and Dad wanted to be here. We'll come by soon, promise." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to scream at her, to ask how she could be so blind. But instead, I put the phone down. The words wouldn't have changed anything. By 10 o'clock, the candles had burned low. The lasagna sat untouched, cold in its dish. Heather helped me pack away the leftovers, her silence saying more than any words could. Finally, she hugged me tightly and said, "They may not see you, Dora, but I do. Don't forget that." After she left, I sat alone in the dim living room. The house I had dreamed of filling with laughter felt like a stranger's place, echoing with silence. The sign across the wall mocked me every time I looked at it. I tore it down, crumpling the paper in my hands. I walked through each room slowly, the kitchen, the small bedroom, the bathroom, touching the walls I had painted myself. Pride should have filled me, but instead it felt hollow. I had built something I wanted to share, but the people I loved most had chosen not to see it. Near midnight, I sat on the porch steps, the cool night air stinging my skin. Somewhere across town, my family was probably still laughing, maybe even taking more photos with Katie's shiny new car. The image haunted me, each smile in that photo carving a deeper wound in my chest. A car could be replaced, paint would chip, furniture would wear down, but the memory of that night, the night my house stood empty, would never leave me. The porch light buzzed faintly above me, casting a weak yellow glow across the steps where I sat. My arms wrapped tightly around my knees, not for warmth, but for some fragile sense of comfort. The night was quiet, too quiet, except for the faint hum of distant cars and the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog. Inside, my house was spotless yet hollow, like a museum display, perfect to look at, but untouched, unlived in. It reminded me of something I'd long tried to bury, the feeling of being invisible. That night didn't create my hurt. It only forced me to face what had been simmering for decades. I had been second for as long as I could remember. The memories came rushing back, uninvited. I was 8 the first time it truly sank in. Katie and I had both brought home report cards. Mine was nearly perfect, straight A's, a glowing note from my teacher praising my creativity in writing. Katie's grades were solid, but not extraordinary. At dinner, I waited for the proud words I thought I had earned. Instead, my father clapped Katie on the back and said, "You'll get there, Dora. But Katie, look at you. You've improved so much. That's what matters." Improved. Not excelled, not achieved, just improved. I sat there quietly, fork scraping my plate, while Katie beamed under their attention. That was the first time I realized being good wasn't enough if my sister was in the same room. Years later, the pattern repeated in different ways. In middle school, I joined choir and practiced for weeks for my first solo performance. On the night of the concert, I sang my heart out. People clapped, even cheered. My mom leaned over to Katie afterward and whispered, "One day, you'll have your moment too, sweetie." I heard it. The words weren't even about me. They were about assuring my sister she wouldn't always be in my shadow. But the truth, I never had a shadow to begin with. By high school, the favoritism wasn't subtle. Katie got a car for her 16th birthday, a used sedan, but still, it was freedom on wheels. I didn't expect the same. I wasn't spoiled. But when I turned 16, my parents handed me a second-hand laptop and a hug. "You're more responsible." Mom said, "We know you'll appreciate it." Appreciate it. That was the word they always used with me, as though my worth was tied not to what I received, but how gracefully I accepted being given less. I thought college might change things. I worked 2 part-time jobs to save for it, filling out applications and scholarships late into the night, while Katie seemed carefree. When the acceptance letters came, I chose a school close to home, partly because I didn't want to lose the thin connection to my family. But at my graduation, when my name was called and I crossed the stage in cap and gown, My parents clapped politely. Later that summer, Katie announced she was engaged to her high school sweetheart. Suddenly, the conversations in our home shifted. No one talked about my degree. Instead, my mother sighed over wedding dresses. My father beamed about the venue they could help pay for. I stood in the kitchen one evening, washing dishes while they flipped through bridal magazines. I got offered a job at the publishing company downtown. I said, trying to inject excitement into my voice. "That's nice. Honey," my mom replied absent-mindedly, her eyes still on the glossy pages. "Katie, look at this gown. Don't you love the lace?" It was as though I had spoken into a void. The job became my escape. I threw myself into it, working late, climbing steadily, finding purpose where my family had never offered it. Yet, even at work events, my parents somehow redirected the spotlight. Once, when I invited them to a company dinner, I overheard my dad bragging not about my promotion, but about Katie's baby on the way. That night, driving home alone, I cried in the car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Not out of jealousy, but because I felt erased. Sitting on my porch now, years later, the memories strung themselves together like beads on a necklace, each one different, but threaded with the same invisible wire. I was always second. Second in attention. Second in praise. Second in love. The night my house stood empty had simply revealed the truth in its clearest form. They hadn't chosen my sister's car. They had chosen her, again, like always. I wanted to tell myself it didn't matter anymore, that I was an adult, that I had built a life without their validation. But as I stared into the dark, I knew it mattered because deep down, I still wanted to be chosen. The next morning, I woke with puffy eyes and a heavy chest. The smell of cold lasagna lingered, reminding me of the night before. I couldn't bear to throw it out yet. It felt like admitting defeat. I grabbed my keys and drove to my parents' house. I didn't know what I planned to say, only that silence would eat me alive. When I pulled up, Katie's new car gleamed in the driveway like a trophy. She stood beside it, talking to Dad, their laughter carrying across the yard. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. For a moment, I considered driving away, but instead, I parked, stepped out, and walked up. "Morning," I said flatly. They turned, surprised. Dad smiled. "Dora, did you see Katie's car? Isn't it beautiful?" I nodded stiffly. I saw the pictures. Katie shifted awkwardly, sensing my tone. "We were going to stop by your house today." "Really? Last night was just crazy." The words scraped like sandpaper. I looked at my father. "You promised me. You promised you'd be there." His smile faltered. "Sweetheart, it was a big night for Katie. The dealership threw a celebration, and we couldn't just skip it." I laughed bitterly, the sound surprising even me. "You couldn't skip it, but you could skip me." Katie's eyes dropped to the pavement. Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. That silence, thicker than any words, was my answer. I turned and walked back to my car, without another word. The drive home blurred, my tears spilling faster than I could wipe them. Back inside, I collapsed onto the couch. The house seemed to echo with their absence, each corner whispering reminders of what I lacked. Yet beneath the ache, a new thought stirred. Maybe it wasn't about being second anymore. Maybe it was about deciding I no longer wanted to compete. For years, I had clung to the hope that one day they would see me, that my achievements would matter. But sitting there, with last night's balloons sagging and my parents' silence ringing in my ears, I realized something terrifying but freeing. If I was always going to be second in their eyes, maybe it was time to stop playing their game at all. The silence after my parents left that night didn't fade. It lingered like smoke, trapped in a closed room, clinging to my skin, suffocating. I tried to sleep, but every creak of the house felt like an echo of their absence. By morning, the ache in my chest had hardened into something heavier, something I couldn't ignore anymore. When the sun rose, I sat at my kitchen table, my untouched coffee cooling in front of me. My phone buzzed with a cheerful text from my sister. "Jenna, car looks even better in the morning light." Can't stop staring, smiling face with heart eyes. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. She hadn't even mentioned last night. Not a single word about missing my housewarming. No apology, no acknowledgement, just her and that car again. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, tempted to type out everything boiling inside me. Do you even care that Mom and Dad chose your car over my entire milestone? Do you realize how much that hurt me? But I didn't. I locked my phone and shoved it into the drawer. Instead, I grabbed my keys and drove to my parents' house, still in my pajamas, hair unbrushed, anger pulsing through every vein. The smell of fresh coffee greeted me when I walked in, and there they were at the dining table, Mom with her crossword, Dad with the newspaper. As if nothing was wrong. As if last night hadn't been a gaping wound. "Morning, Dora," Mom said, looking up with that soft smile she always used when she wanted to smooth things over without actually fixing anything. I didn't sit down. "Do you even realize what you did last night?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't stop. "You promised me. You told me you'd be there." Dad folded his paper with a sigh, the sound heavy and dismissive. "Dora, we couldn't be in two places at once. Jenna needed us too." "She needed you?" I laughed bitterly. For what? To clap at a car, reveal, like it's the birth of a child? I bought a house, Dad. A home. I stood there, waiting for you, while you chose to cheer for a piece of metal. Mom put her pen down, her lips tightening. "It wasn't like that. You're exaggerating." Exaggerating. My hands shook. I decorated that place for weeks. I cooked. I cleaned. I planned everything down to the last detail. And I stood in an empty room because my family couldn't bother to show up. The air turned brittle, sharp as glass. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Dad pushed his chair back. His tone clipped. "This isn't about houses or cars. It's about the way you always compete with Jenna. You've been doing this your whole life." The words hit harder than I expected. Compete? I wasn't competing. I was begging for scraps of attention, for once to be enough. "I'm not competing," I whispered, my throat tightening. "I just wanted you to see me, to show up for me." But Dad only shook his head and walked out of the room. Mom sighed, reaching for my hand across the table, but I pulled back. Her touch felt like a bandage slapped over a wound still bleeding. I left before tears betrayed me. Back at my house, the silence felt heavier than before, wrapping itself around me until I couldn't breathe. I turned on the TV, hoping for distraction, but every family sitcom felt like a cruel joke. Laugh tracks echoing over bonds that never cracked, parents who always showed up, siblings who teased but stood by each other. I shut it off. That night, I lay awake replaying Dad's words. "You're always competing with Jenna." Was I thought about birthdays, graduations, even small achievements. How every moment I tried to share was somehow overshadowed. When I got my first job out of college, Jenna got engaged the same week. When I finished my certification last year, Jenna posted her vacation photos, and Mom shared them like they were newsworthy. Maybe I had been competing, but not by choice. It was like running a race where no matter how fast I sprinted, the medal was already waiting in Jenna's hands. The cracks in our bond had been there for years. I realized last night hadn't created them. It just split them wide open. The next weekend, I decided to host a small brunch for friends. Nothing fancy, just bagels, fruit, and coffee. I needed noise in my house, laughter to drown out the echo of that empty night. As my friends chatted around the table, my phone buzzed again. a photo from Mom. Jenna standing next to her car with Dad, both beaming, arms around each other. The caption read, "So proud of our girl." Something inside me snapped. I excused myself, locked myself in the bathroom, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My cheeks flushed, eyes glassy. No matter what I did, no matter what I built, it would never be enough. When I came back out, my friends noticed the change in me. "You okay, Dora?" Emily, my closest friend, asked. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just a family thing." But Emily didn't buy it. Later, as she helped me clear the dishes, she leaned closer. "You don't have to pretend with me. Whatever it is, it's eating you alive." Her words cracked something in me. I told her everything about the housewarming, the empty room, the car. She listened quietly, her eyes soft, until I finished. "Dora," she said, "finally, families are supposed to show up for you, not make you feel invisible. That's not competition. That's neglect." Neglect. The word stung, but it fit. In the days that followed, I tried to pull back, emotionally, to protect myself. I didn't call Mom as often, didn't reply to Jenna's endless car updates. But distance didn't heal the cracks. It made them deeper. Mom showed up at my house unannounced one afternoon, holding a basket of muffins like peace offerings. "I miss you," she said, standing awkwardly in my doorway. "Do you?" I asked, unable to stop the bitterness. "Or do you just miss not feeling guilty?" Her eyes glistened. "That's not fair. Neither is being treated like an afterthought." I snapped. The muffins stayed untouched on my counter for days, growing stale, just like the words between us. The real breaking point came during Sunday dinner 2 weeks later. I hadn't planned on going, but Emily urged me not to isolate completely. When I walked into my parents' house, the first thing I saw was a framed picture on the mantel, Jenna with her car, Mom and Dad grinning beside her, right where our family portrait used to be. "Really?" I muttered under my breath. Dinner was tense, conversation shallow. I tried to eat, tried to ignore the photo staring at me, but halfway through, Jenna started talking about how she was considering entering her car in shows. Mom clapped her hands together. "That's wonderful. You'll shine, sweetheart." That was it. The final fracture. I set my fork down. "Do you even hear yourselves? Do you realize you've turned every family moment into the Jenna show? I bought a house. I tried to build something real, and you couldn't even show up. But her car gets applause, photos, frames on the mantel." The table went silent. Jenna blinked, startled, then scoffed. "Dora, you're overreacting. It's just a car." "Then why does it feel like it matters more than me?" My voice cracked, but I didn't care. Why do I always end up being second choice? No one answered. Not Mom, not Dad, not Jenna. The silence was the loudest thing in the room. I pushed back my chair, heart pounding, and walked out. This time, I didn't look back. The night I stormed out of my parents' house, the cold air cut against my face like shards of glass. I drove home with trembling hands gripping the wheel, headlights blurring through the sting in my eyes. I didn't sleep much that night, or the nights that followed. The fracture in our family had widened into a chasm, and for the first time in my life, I wondered if it could ever be bridged. As November crept closer, so did the looming shadow of Thanksgiving. In our family, it wasn't just a holiday, it was tradition carved into stone. Turkey, cranberry sauce, laughter echoing in the kitchen, board games spread across the dining table. Every year, no matter what happened, we gathered. But this year, the thought of sitting across from Jenna and pretending nothing was broken made my stomach twist. Still, a part of me clung to hope. Maybe the holiday could be a reset button. Maybe, for once, we could sit down, share a meal, and peel back the bitterness. When Mom called a week before Thanksgiving, her voice was careful, like she was stepping on glass. Dora, we're all meeting at the house this year. Same as always. I hesitated, the silence stretching. Do you really want me there? Her voice wavered just slightly. Of course we do. Your family. Family. The word stung more than it soothed. I agreed anyway. Against my better judgment, I said yes. Thanksgiving morning arrived crisp and cold, leaves scattering across the pavement as I pulled into the driveway of the house that once felt like a sanctuary. I carried a pumpkin pie in my hands, more out of habit than spirit. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and cinnamon. It should have been comforting, but instead, it felt suffocating. The walls seemed to whisper memories. Mom humming in the kitchen, Dad carving the turkey, Jenna and I sneaking extra rolls before dinner. Back when love wasn't measured against who got the louder applause. I stepped into the kitchen, pie in hand. Mom turned, her apron dusted with flour, her smile a little too practiced. You made it, she said, relief flickering in her eyes. Yeah, I murmured, setting the pie down on the counter. Jenna swept in moments later, her hair perfect, her dress festive. She carried a tray of roasted vegetables, chattering about how she almost burned them. Dad laughed, patting her shoulder like she had just performed a miracle. I stood there, invisible again. We sat down at the table, the turkey glistening under the warm light. For a while, conversation stayed polite. Dad asked about work. Mom complimented the food. Jenna launched into a story about her car's new detailing job. I chewed my food slowly, nodding at the right moments, my chest tightening with every laugh that wasn't directed my way. Then Jenna said it, the sentence that cracked the night wide open. You know, she said, twirling her fork, this year's been the best. Between the car shows and the attention it's getting, I feel like I've finally made it. People actually notice me now. The words lodged in my throat like a bone. My fork clattered against the plate. People notice you. I said, my voice low but sharp. You've been noticed your whole life, Jenna. Mom and Dad have made sure of that. The table went still. Dora, Mom warned gently, but I couldn't stop. No, let's talk about it. Every achievement, every milestone I've had, do you know what it's been met with? Silence. Or worse, overshadowed. And now it's a car. A car that somehow deserves more pride, more photos, more space on the mantle than me. Jenna's eyes narrowed. This again, you sound jealous. It's not my fault you can't be happy for me. Jealous. My laugh was hollow. Do you even hear yourself? I wanted my family at my housewarming. Jenna, just once. I wanted to feel like I mattered. Instead, you stole that night with your car. Dad's chair scraped against the floor as he leaned forward. Enough, Dora. Thanksgiving isn't the time for this. When is the time, Dad? My voice trembled, raw and rising, because every time I've tried to talk about it, I've been dismissed, brushed off like I'm dramatic. You tell me I'm competing, but I've never wanted to compete. I just wanted to be seen. The room vibrated with tension. The ticking clock on the wall grew louder, each second stretching. Finally, Mom set her fork down, her voice quiet but firm. She's right. The air shifted. All eyes turned to her. I've noticed it too, she continued, her gaze fixed on Dad. How we've praised Jenna louder, stood taller for her. And Dora, we failed you. My breath caught. I had never heard Mom admit something so plainly. Dad's face hardened. You're exaggerating. We love both our daughters equally. Love isn't enough if it doesn't show up, I whispered. My throat ached, but I pushed on. You've been there for Jenna in ways you've never been for me. And I can't keep pretending it doesn't hurt. For a moment, no one spoke. Jenna crossed her arms, defensive. Dad stared at his plate, jaw tight. Mom looked at me, with tears brimming in her eyes. The silence was heavier than words. After dinner, I slipped outside, needing air. The cold bit at my cheeks, but it was grounding. I leaned against the porch railing, staring at the bare trees swaying against the dark sky. Footsteps creaked behind me. It was Mom. She wrapped a shawl tighter around her shoulders. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "for last night, for the housewarming, for all the times I didn't see you the way you deserved." Tears burned at the corners of my eyes. "Why now, Mom? Why did it take this long?" Her voice cracked, because sometimes we don't realize the cracks until something breaks. We stood there in silence, the kind that didn't suffocate, but healed, even just a little. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or if Dad or Jenna would ever understand. But in that moment, with Mom's words lingering in the frosty air, I felt something shift. Not fixed, not whole, but seen. For once, truly seen. The porch light flickered behind me as Mom's footsteps faded back inside. I stayed there a little longer, the cold air sharp in my lungs, my hands gripping the railing like it was the only thing holding me upright. For years, I had been clutching to my family's approval the same way, white-knuckled, desperate, waiting for a warmth that never came. That night, I decided something had to change. Not them. Me. The drive home was quiet. The roads were slick with frost, the houses along the way glowing with holiday lights. Inside my car, I let the silence swallow me. No music, no news, just the sound of my own breathing, shaky but steadying. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew the choice was made. I couldn't keep living as a shadow in my own life. The first morning after Thanksgiving, I did something small but symbolic. I dragged the old storage boxes from my closet and pulled out years' worth of photographs and keepsakes, family portraits where I was wedged on the end, birthday cards that felt more obligatory than heartfelt, notes where my name seemed like an afterthought. I didn't throw them away, not yet, but I packed them neatly into a box, sealed it with tape, and slid it under my bed. Out of sight. Out of reach. For the first time in my life, I wasn't clinging to the evidence of where I belonged. I was making space for what might come next. At work the following week, something unexpected happened. During lunch break, my coworker Lisa leaned over and said, "You seemed quiet yesterday. Everything okay?" Normally, I would have brushed it off, maybe smiled and said, "I'm fine." But this time, I didn't. "I've been letting go of some things," I admitted, picking at my sandwich. "Family stuff. It's complicated." Lisa didn't press, but her simple nod and soft, "I get that," felt heavier than 100 empty apologies from my parents. That was when it hit me. Sometimes connection came not from years of shared history, but from someone simply listening without judgment. In the evenings, my house began to feel different. Not haunted by silence anymore, but shaped by intention. I invited a few neighbors over for coffee one night. We sat in the living room with mismatched mugs, talking about everything from favorite recipes to the snow forecast. It wasn't flashy, wasn't perfect, but it was real. Later, when the last of the mugs clinked in the sink, I sat back on the couch and let the warmth wash over me. My house had been empty on that first night, painfully so, but now, with voices echoing off the walls, I realized it didn't matter who filled the space. What mattered was that it was filled with people who wanted to be there. Still, the hardest part wasn't letting others in. It was learning how to be alone without feeling abandoned. One Saturday, I spent the entire day by myself. No plans, no errands, just me. I cooked a simple breakfast, lit a candle, and read a novel I'd been meaning to start. In the afternoon, I painted one of the spare bedrooms a soft sage green, the color I'd always loved, but never chosen because my family thought it was too dull. As the brush moved across the wall, I realized how often I had let other voices decide my life. That green room became more than paint. It was proof that I could choose for myself. The calls from my family came less often. Dad sent a few clipped texts. Hope you're well, or cars running great. But nothing deeper. Jenna didn't reach out at all. And Mom, she called once, her voice hesitant, asking if I'd come by for Christmas. I don't think I will this year, I said, my voice steady even as my heart raced. There was a pause on the line. Then she whispered, I understand. And maybe she did. Or maybe she didn't. Either way, it was the first holiday I spent without them. And though the ache was real, it was paired with something else, freedom. On Christmas Eve, I hosted a small dinner at my house. Just a handful of friends and neighbors, nothing grand. We laughed over too salty gravy, exchanged dollar store gifts, and sang along, badly, to holiday songs on the radio. At one point, I caught myself standing in the kitchen doorway, watching everyone gathered around the table, and a strange thought crossed my mind. This feels like family. Not the one I was born into, but the one I was building. Choosing myself wasn't about cutting my family out completely. It was about no longer waiting for them to validate me. It was about realizing I didn't need to prove my worth at every turn. One evening, I sat down with a notebook and wrote a list, not of resolutions, but of boundaries. Simple things. I won't cancel my plans just to fit theirs. I won't beg for apologies that don't come. I will surround myself with people who see me, not just my shadow. The act of writing it down felt like reclaiming something I had lost years ago. Months passed, and life didn't magically smooth itself out. There were days when the loneliness crept in, when I missed the idea of family more than the reality of it. But instead of spiraling, I learned to sit with those feelings, to acknowledge them without letting them undo me. One rainy afternoon, I found myself driving past my parents' house. The lights were on, silhouettes moving inside. For a moment, I considered stopping, but then I kept driving, not out of spite, but because I no longer needed to stand at their door, waiting to be welcomed. The real turning point came one spring evening. I was gardening in the front yard when a neighbor's little girl skipped over, handing me a flower she had picked. "This is for you, Miss Dora," she said, grinning wide. I crouched down, taking the flower like it was the rarest gift in the world. "Thank you," I whispered, my throat tight. That tiny gesture held more sincerity than years of hollow compliments from my own kin. It reminded me that love doesn't always come from where you expect it, but it comes if you make room for it. Now, when I walk through my house, it doesn't echo with emptiness anymore. The walls hold laughter, the kitchen smells of meals shared, and the garden blooms with flowers planted by my own hands. I don't know if my family and I will ever fully mend. Maybe one day we'll sit together again. Maybe not. But what I do know is this: I am no longer defined by the love I didn't get. I am defined by the love I choose for myself and for the life I am building. And that, finally, is enough. For the first time, I felt no need to glance over my shoulder, no urge to wait for anyone's approval, no craving for validation. The weight of years spent shrinking myself for others lifted, leaving behind something startling in its simplicity: peace. My steps forward were unhurried yet certain, carrying me not toward perfection, not toward anyone else's expectations, but toward a life that finally felt like mine.